We are joined by Armin and Bryony tonight, both born and raised in Mexico City. They're graphic designers, probably best known as the co-founders of Under Consideration, a design firm and blog publishing enterprise. One of their most well-known blogs, Brand New, focuses on daily reviews and crits of the industry's new and redesigned brands. Prior to Under Consideration, the pair worked in the industry for more than a decade, accruing experience in web, branding, programming, book, and magazine design. They are now Midwest natives, but they have lived across the country. Their work has been recognized in numerous award publications over the years. Between writing several design books, running half a dozen successful design crit and showcase blogs over the last 20 years, coordinating conference after conference since 2010, hosting a new podcast, The Follow Up, make sure you're listening, cranking out well-crafted work of their own, raising 2 daughters, and having 4 of the cutest dogs I've ever seen on social media. Armin and Bryony have cemented themselves as powerhouses in the lexicon of 21st century graphic design. So tonight, we will be hearing from them about Mexico's DIY ingenuity, hardworking ethic, and underappreciated energy, and how those funnel into their own work. So it is an understatement to say how excited I am for this talk, and I will stop blabbing and turn it over to them.
Good evening, everybody. Here where we're having a little bit of trouble unmuting ourselves. I'm Bryony.
Hello, and I'm Armin. And as Ali mentioned, we do have 2 daughters and 4 dogs, and we're in the basement, and they're on the level above. So at any given point, all hell might break loose upstairs, and you'll hear them. So we'll just have to deal with that if it comes up.
Let's go ahead and share our screen.
Yeah. Oh wait, share screen.
This part just doesn't get any clunkier when we're doing virtual, unfortunately.
All right, and we're just gonna assume that that you can see this, and that the first word that you see is "hola," which is hello in Spanish, just in case. But no, hi everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you tonight on this fine cold evening in February. Talking to the AIGA Toledo crowd and anyone else who might be joining. Who knows? With the magic of Zoom, you can be anywhere. So as Ali mentioned as well, we're here to tell you about how the title of our talk is Hechos in USA, Made in USA, but the Mexican way. And we're going to go over a few things that how our past has informed our present.
Yeah.
If we say anything that you enjoy, there are social media handles on the right and left. We're going to start with a little bit of our story.
It's important to understand the foundation of where it all comes from. It has been a long journey, that's for sure. And as Armin mentioned, it started in Mexico City when we met in 1997, 6, 7, somewhere around there. So we're not very good with dates. Both of us studying graphic design. And
it should be specified that we were both born in Mexico City. So it's a city of 20 million people. And then the night we met, after we met, and then we realized that we lived 5 minutes apart from each other.
Which is unheard of, and a blessing in a city with the most obnoxious traffic.
So we met. Before we do that, you were going to.
Mexico City. So I was attending a university in Mexico City studying graphic design, but while I realized I loved graphic design, I did not like the university one bit. So I ended up exploring other alternatives for my education and ended up moving to Atlanta to study at the Portfolio Center, now the Miami Ad School. In the meantime, I left Armin to graduate from graphic design at a different university,
and because she had been my only girlfriend ever during my first however many years of life that was, 19, I thought I'm going to stick with this one, and I'm also going to go to Atlanta. And this was during the original .com era, so 1999, and it was fairly easy to get a job back then because there were so many opportunities for designers.
And not only a job, but a job that required a working visa for an international employee.
So I went to work at a place called US Web CKS that later changed its name to March 1st. It was 10,000 people worldwide and 300 people in Atlanta. And then that company went bankrupt, and Bryony finished Portfolio Center. So we picked up and moved to Chicago.
Once we got there, I got a job at Bagby and Company, and we realized, it's even though we both wanted to end up in New York at some point, starting in New York with our first jobs as international employees was not a very good idea. We would end up living in a closet and just getting coffee for people. So we moved to Chicago, and we were there for about 4 years at 2 design firms.
The design firm that I went to work at was called Norman Design. In contrast to March 1st, where we were 300 people in Atlanta, this was only 4 people. And it was really nice to just get smaller clients, be more hands-on, as opposed to and work with do little business cards and get all nerdy with details like that instead of working on websites for clients like UPS and Home Depot and Coca-Cola that never launched. So it was a nice change of pace, but it was also an opportunity to start taking what I learned at March 1st about doing websites and doing this for both my job, and then that's when we started Speak Up, which was our first blog. And
we were very cold in Chicago. We did not want to go outside, so we started doing our own projects, basically.
Yeah, so the weekend, instead of having fun in the snow or whatever, we started a blog. At this point, so this is around 2001. At this point, we got married, and this is the only picture that we have that proves our Mexican-ness. And this is
never mind my brother and the kilt in the background, but that's a whole other story.
But yeah, this is the mariachi time at around 5 a.m. after we've been partying all night. So proof that we're from Mexico. Nothing says that we are from Mexico like being dressed like mariachis, even if you're not. Anyway, after Chicago, we did pick up and move to New York, which was our ambition and dream to do.
Well, why don't you start with your job part?
First I moved I got a job at a medium-sized firm called Decker Design. We were like 12 people. And then 6 months in, I got an email from Michael Beirut, one of the partners at Pentagram, who I had established a relationship with through Speak Up, because he enjoyed the blog. I enjoyed his blog, Design Observer, at the time. So
you had asked for a job, and he said he didn't have an opening.
Yeah, well, he didn't say
at that point.
And he said like I had already had 5 years experience, and he said like, no, you're a little bit too senior. We like to hire younger people so that they're in from the beginning and then they stay and whatnot. But then it turned out that 2 of his senior designers left at the same time to start their own firms, to move on to other ventures. And he emailed me and said, well, would you be interested in coming to work with me? And I said, yes, please, I'm coming right over right now. So I got the opportunity to work at Pentagram for 2.5 years, and it was pretty great. And I'm not going to get into details about that. Maybe in the Q&A we can go, maybe there'll be a question about that. But
in the meantime, I got a job basically in Wall Street at Addison Design doing annual reports. And so that was something that I had always been intrigued about. It's a very high-paced process, and that is basically non-existent at this point. But back then, it was a whole lot of fun. And I was there for a couple of years before quitting so that we could start kind of a soft launch of Under Consideration, the design firm, where I would start working from home, start to gather some clients, some freelance work, while we still had Armin's nice steady paycheck through Pentagram. And at the same time, we would start a family.
And then they gave me 3 months off at half pay paternity leave at Pentagram, and I thought, great, I'll be home for 3 months, then I'll come back and I'll stay and I'll keep working on that paycheck and stay there for as long as possible. And then I had my 3 months at home. I went back to work, and a week later I was like, I can't I don't like this. I don't like being at work all the time. I don't like missing out on being with my newborn child of 3 months and multiple pooping times and burping and all that. It's just like, that's where I want to be. I want to be at home with my kid and my wife. And,
Oh, thank you.
yeah. And so I think it was maybe 2-3 months after coming back from paternity leave that I left Pentagram.
Well, but it's important how we did that.
Yep.
So, we were out for getting a cup of coffee at our favorite little shop, and we started having a conversation, and Armin's telling me, like, this is not working out for me anymore. And I'm like, yeah, I noticed. So we drafted a business plan on the back of the muffin bag, basically listing the projects that I had going on. We realized, okay, we can pay the bills and survive for the next 6 months. That gives us 6 months to figure out how we're going to make this work in the long term. And that was a Sunday, and you went on Monday and quit that day.
Yeah. I think I needed an extra week of working up the courage to break both me and Michael's hearts, because we enjoyed each other's company. So in 2000, this is 2007, we started our own business out of the basement of our
condo in Brooklyn.
little condo in Brooklyn. We did some design work. We did some of our own projects. That's when we started the Brand New as well, and we'll get much into detail about that.
We wrote a few books.
And then we realized, we're living in New York. We're paying to live in New York without really living in New York, because now we're working from home. We have our kid who doesn't like to go to galleries for some reason, doesn't like to get on the subway for some reason.
We were living in a 10-block radius, and it was ridiculous to be spending that amount of money living in a place that, even if you wanted to go to the movies one night, it was $150 just in babysitter and whatnot. So it was time for a change.
So we picked up and moved to Austin, Texas. This is 2008, 2009. And what's interesting there, and one of the reasons why we ended up there was just change of pace. At the time, Austin wasn't what it is now, which is one of the most overpriced housing markets in the country, and it still wasn't as full, it still wasn't as trafficky, and it was great. It was just a really nice change of pace from New York.
Among other things, it was below what we call the winter line. After being in winterlands for 10 years, we really, really needed a break and go back to kind of our Mexican weather a little bit.
So we were in Austin for 9 years, and that's when we've really established what under consideration is now, or what it sort of was pre-pandemic, and it's still what it is now, but things have changed a little bit.
We're just on pause for a few.
And then after 9 years of being in Austin, then we had another kid, then we had a dog, then we had another dog, and then we realized, okay, it's starting to get a little bit crowded in this house. It's starting to get really costly. The cost of living in Austin has gone up.
So we have to work harder and spend more hours in the office versus outside with the kids, enjoying the weather, enjoying nature, enjoying, life in general. And all of a sudden we were like, and the only reason we were there was what attracted us in the first place. But there was no family, nothing to really tie us to Austin. So it was time for a change.
So we picked up and
opened Google Maps.
Yeah, and we settled on, after a lot of research, we settled on Bloomington, Indiana. And we're not going to get into a lot of details about why there or what other things we explore. But, a big part of it was we were able to get a nice big house. And not because we wanted a nice big house, but we have a proper office space, we have a workshop space, we have enough room for 2 kids, 2 dogs.
To put it in perspective, the entire 9 years that we were in Austin, Texas, we took the master bedroom as our office.
So it was time to get a decent place where we could actually set up properly and do better work with lower mortgage and take the financial stress off of the equation of living life. So that's where we are. That's where we've been. That's where you find us at the moment until further notice.
Hopefully until the kids finish high school.
Now, the focus of our story, of our talk, is going to start here in New York, as I mentioned, which is when we started. Sorry, let you see the title slide for Brand New. Sorry.
So Brand New, as you most of you are familiar with, is covering rebrands, basically looking at the before and after of a logo. And so this is an older version because we obviously have to rebrand brand new every now and then.
Yeah, so this is the 2006 version. When we started, we didn't think that it was going to become what it has become. We've gone over a few redesigns over the years, but we've always maintained the focus on writing opinions about either logo and identity redesigns or new introductions of well-known products, services, companies, etc. And this is our latest
Iteration.
And we cover more content because there's many more publicized logo redesigns nowadays. Everybody from Pfizer and GM to the cleaners next door will issue a press release about their logo redesign. So there's a lot of content out there. But what has remained always the constant is that it's just logo and identity redesigns. We don't veer into other facets of graphic design. When Brand New started, we had, I would say, about 60 to 70,000 page views a month. And before we went into the subscription model, it's not reflected here, but we ended up getting up to 2 million page views a month. And this is not to brag, it's just to share how big this website has gotten and how
the interest of it has shaped culture within designers, and even beyond designers. We realize that a lot of the audience ends up showing up because they're looking for auto industry information or sports, and they're following their sports team and end up looking at the rebrand and then staying on to see other things.
So you can see a very gradual, steady climb in traffic, just general interest from the bigger population other than graphic designers. We have 500,000 unique visitors a month, which is a lot. And one of the main things that fuel Brand New are the tips that we receive by email, whether it's someone that, as Bryony was saying, someone that follows a sports team and they get an email about their new logo, then they send us that email to us and then we write about it. So that's something that we get anywhere between 40 and 60 tips a week, 150 a month, and that's what really fuels. And it's either from the designers, the clients, or just random people that saw a change and they want us to write about it. Now, with Brand New, the story turns interesting in 2009, which, if you might remember, is when we moved to Austin, Texas, and also happened to be the economic recession of 2008 and 2009. I'm gonna make the baby stop crying because it's too distracting. So what happened to us was that we were
busy, very, very busy in New York, but it coincided with the recession and the move that we wrapped up all of our projects, and all of a sudden we had nothing.
So we were in Austin, and for a moment there, we had 2 mortgages to pay because we hadn't been able to sell our Brooklyn apartment as quickly as we would have wanted. And then, up until that point, all of our client work had come from word of mouth. We had never had to really work hard to get design work. We had advertising on the blogs that was pretty good, but then the advertising dried out, and then there were no clients, and they were like, how do you get clients? And we realized we have no idea how to do new business development. So we're like, all right, screw that. We're not going to do that because we don't know how to do it. We don't enjoy it. So we tried a little bit. We tried, but we realized.
We also barfed in our mouths a little bit in the process.
So then we thought, right, what can we do based on this growing audience that we have on Brand New that could generate us money, that could generate us interest, and do something that gives us something to do. So we thought, what about a design conference? Because we had previously had an idea to do a design conference, but which was like scary. We didn't really know what made it different. And then we thought, right, what if it's the Brand New conference and it's just a conference about logo and identity and branding, just the same as Brand New? Could that lead somewhere?
And at that point, we started doing our research and realized that that did not exist. You know, most design conferences are very broad. They want to cover all of the things, and they also, in a way, want to fix the world and think big. And this is really a very tight niche for kind of obsessive geeks about branding.
All right, so we'll say goodbye to the baby.
Yeah.
And
So
then-
we inaugurated the conference in New York in 2010. And one of the things that we had to do that was a bit of a learning curve was we used Eventbrite to sell the tickets. And I'm sure you've all used it at some point. But the main thing is that they don't give you the money from all of the ticket sales until the day after the event. You know, you deliver, then they give you the money. So this whole time, we have the 2 mortgages, we've got the baby, and by then 2 babies, and we're literally maxing out every credit card we can get our hands on, knowing that the money is there, you know, being very cognizant of what was coming in but we couldn't use, and just spending all of our savings and using the credit cards in order to pay for all of the things that we needed for the conference, and then, you know, pay it all up the day after the conference.
And, you know, we did in New York thinking that, you know, even if by accident a designer wakes up the day of the conference, like, oh, there's a branding conference here, I'll just walk in and see what's going on. So we just figured we had a built-in audience because that's where the majority of the identity designers are in the US. And, you know, we thought 1-day conference, 8 speakers, keep it simple. 8 speakers? Yes, 8
Yes.
speakers. And
Well, 8 sessions.
8 sessions. And, you know, we sold out. The speakers loved it. The few sponsors that we had that time loved it. The attendees loved it. And we enjoyed it. And then we made money. So we made
We enjoyed ourselves more than we
Yeah.
thought we would.
we had never done an event of this scale. We had done a few small events here and there, but nothing at this scale for this amount of, for 8 sessions during the day.
And this is the only conference where we've brought the kids with us because one of them was 8 months old.
And never again.
Never again. Yeah.
So
Grandma gets involved.
So we did the 1-day conference for 4 years. We did New York, then San Francisco, then 2 times in New York. Then in 2014, then we thought, well, you know, we do all this hard setup just for 1 day. What if we extended it to 2?
And we also heard from our audience in saying it's a lot easier for me to justify at work or get funding from work to attend a 2-day conference than it is for a 1-day conference, especially if there's travel involved. And so we figured, okay, let's keep the same ticket price. I think we increased it like $50. But go to a bigger theater and let's try to increase the amount of people in the audience versus saying, okay, now we're going to 2 days, so it's double the price. We did not feel that was fair or necessary.
So we grew from, you know, 400 or 500 people for a 1-day conference to 750 people on this 2-day conference. Then we went back to New York. We went back to New York and it was 900 people. Then we went to Nashville and that was 1,000 people. And that's when we realized, okay, now we don't have to be in New York or Chicago or a big design city. We can go to different, more interesting places like Nashville, and people will travel to the conference. And that had become until 2019 sort of our happy place of a 2-day conference for 1,000 people. That it's important to also know that we do everything. You know, we hire all this, we get all the speakers.
We curate all the speakers. We get their flights, their hotels. We write the introductions. We're emceeing the conference. We're getting the catering. We're picking up the trash. We're chasing the tote bags.
Yeah, on the day of the event, we do have volunteers to help with stuff, but the whole planning, the whole implementation is just me and Bryony. So it's you know, at some point it would probably have been feasible to grow to a 2,000 person event, but it's not something that we want, or because we don't want to deal with that lack of person it's not one-on-one, it's 1 on 1,000 or 2 on
but
we
1,000, recognize people year after year, and as you'll see up ahead in a little bit. But for example, when we're making the name badges, you can be assembling and putting them all together and checking the list, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I finished the ends. Where's this person? And you can email them, and they're like, oh no, I just had a baby. And there's a different level of connection with our audience that we would not be able to sustain with more than 1,000 people.
So yeah, so we've done the 2-day conference now in Chicago.
And at this point, we're also branding based on the city. So, taking rhinestones and embroidery for Nashville, things like that, and starting to really identify iconic aspects of the cities in order to inform the branding.
And when we this is the swag for the first conference, and you can see it's pretty simple. We didn't know exactly what we're doing, so it's just one color printing on whatever the vendor had available. So simple tote bags, simple T-shirts, simple programs. Second year, we got a little bit more ambitious with a translucent cover, and the brochures on this one, they're pretty small and thin.
But from the very beginning, especially starting in the second year, we also wanted all of these items to become kind of collectibles. We did not want to create something that would end up in the trash can, not even leaving the conference center or in the hotel room. We really wanted to make it special enough, informative enough that you would want to keep it. So all of the programs actually are more like case studies and portfolios for all the designers and the sponsors themselves, versus just here's an ad, flip half-page ad and move on.
So then this is 2012, our third conference. We started to get a little bit more ambitious now that we have a little bit more budget. So this is kind of like a bigger piece printed on newsprint with a purple stock cover and red stitching, very fancy, very pretty. 2013, that's when we started to, that's when we realized, look, okay, so we have only 500 people. We can start customizing things to our liking.
You can start to get picky and the details, and if they don't exist, you can make them happen.
So, for example, the goodie bags, they're fairly small goodie bags, and the color palette for that year was black, white, and yellow, and the bags were white. They had white handles originally, and we thought, wouldn't it be nice if those handles were yellow? So we thought, right, let's make them yellow. So this is our backyard in Austin.
This is the year that all of our neighbors discovered the brand new conference. When they walking their dogs, they would be like, what on earth are you doing there? And 4 or 5 years later, they would be like, oh, conference season again? Well, send over the kids.
And then also we thought, well, maybe we can start customizing the program somehow if it's only for 500 people. So here you might look at that picture and think, oh, it shows the logo printed on different places on the cover.
But there's different logos if you go back.
Yeah, there's different logos.
There's variables.
But what it is, it's a laser cut grid of little dots, and the logos are hand sewn on each one in different places, and they all align to a specific grid, so you can put them anywhere that you want. And then Bryony had mastered the sewing from 6 minutes down to like a minute or something.
A minute and a half, yeah. So after putting the kids to bed, I would put on my headphones. That's the year I discovered Mumford & Sons. They had the perfect tempo for counting dots and just focusing on, okay, I'm making 50 of these tonight, or however many. And they just embroidered away for hours and hours and hours.
Then in 2014, we did some stickers. This was like a type pattern that said 2014 Bryony Conference in different ways. And we put stickers. We printed stickers that you could put at different levels, and it would always align. And one thing to note here is that the stickers were placed the day before of the conference by the volunteers, and that's when we also realized this is too stressful. And the volunteers, even though you have 16 people doing it, they're just not quite as fast as we would like. So in 2015, when we
really went up another level.
That's when we thought, all right, we're going back to New York. We're going to have 1,000 people. Let's really figure out a way to take this up a notch and turn up the level on the hand assembly of the materials. But before we get to that, the reason kind of to pay off on the title of our conference, how being from Mexico and having some relative quote unquote fame, people have asked us, how does Mexico influence your design? And we've never.
It's not an aesthetic influence.
like we don't design Mexican in any way. So after thinking a little bit about it, we've realized that it's not the aesthetic, but it's the ingenuity and hard work of our people that has really influenced how we work and how we do the things that we do. And it's all about being resourceful. It's about finding solutions to problems that are sort of mundane, that make your life a little bit better in different ways, even if it's not perfect.
Kind of thinking outside of the box, but without even considering the box. It just happens.
Yeah, like the box doesn't have to be a box. It can be a sandal.
A baby shoe.
Yeah. There's so many examples of, taking elements from the world around you and using them for things that they were not meant to, in a way. Mexicans are really good at chillaxing, so we'll find any which way to chillax.
In a better way.
Yeah.
He rogado que vuelvas a mí, he pedido tu pronto regreso, porque siento en el...
And then again, like, even if you don't have the best budget, you can still secure your belongings. You can just grab a chain and lock, or our favorite, which is the Mexican home security system, which are broken bottles glued with concrete on top of a fence so that people don't jump over your fence. So it's also rather beautiful because it's the light hits them, and they're all they have all the different soda flavors in there. So it's kind of like a nice,
and it's recyclable, sustainable solution. Requires no electricity.
So that's the Mexican influence, and we have 4 examples of how that influence has played out in our designs for the brand new conference. So here you have a pretty good system for how to spray your hot sauce, which I don't know if you want to do it, but I guess
I'm all for spraying it evenly on the taco.
Yeah, I guess.
Versus...
you want to get all of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of spray. This is after we've commandoed ourselves, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in that GIF. For 2015, we're going to New York. We decided that we wanted to go with the graffiti aspect of New York, that grittiness, but also acknowledge the opulence of New York and how expensive it is. So you have this kind of like stencil aesthetic on one layer, and then this really elegant, ornate layer above. And the first thing that we did, which we thought, right, this is going to be easy. We just create some stencils for all the company names of all the speakers, and we'll just spray them, scan them, put them to the computer, and voila.
And see what happens.
Yeah.
And usually we start with a website, and that's once we've solved that, we start moving on to the other items of the identity.
So pretty simple so far. Spray, scan, digitize, and you're done. But then for the program,
a traditional or a sane designer, I should say, would follow the same principle. Stencil, spray, scan, digitize, and send to the printer.
Yeah, and we could ask the printer, like, hey, here are 6 designs, print them differently, print 6 different covers out of 1,000 print run. Like, it would be fine, and people would enjoy it and whatnot. But
it would look like graffiti, but it wouldn't feel like graffiti, and that was the big trigger for us.
So our decision was we're going to spray paint by hand individually 1,000 covers for 1,000 people. It's important to know that those 1,000, without 1,000, it's fine. But then it ended up being 1,600 because the printer needed make readies. The gold foil stamper needed make ready. So we did 600 extra, knowing that they would go in the trash. So how did we do it? We came up with there's 6 different designs. So there's 6 different stations that work like this.
Now, let's take into account that this is Austin, Texas, and this is July. So, mild temperatures around.
And then all that it was, it was just putting in one piece of paper, spraying, taking it out, putting it to dry, And again, like, let me just play that back. Just, well, obviously wearing back then,
Filtration systems.
if we had kept them, we should have kept those masks, knowing what was to come in 2020. And here's another example of Mexican ingenuity. How can you make your own face mask in COVID times? And as the caption reads, we haven't taken over the world only because we choose not to. But what you end up with is 1,000 completely different covers with the texture, with the smell, with the actual grittiness of the spray
Every
paint.
now and then, even a bug.
And then on top of that, then there's the elegance of the foil stamp. And we have 4 different color stock covers. We really like playing with color and variety of designs.
There's a really nice element of people comparing. Oh, you got pink, I got yellow, and that actually breaks the ice and gets people to start to talk to each other when they haven't met yet.
And then the goodie bags, we also wanted to spray paint them by hand. So this one, the method was a little bit different because we have to protect the back of the bag.
Otherwise the spray paint bleeds into the other side. So we always find solutions when we try to recycle materials as much as possible. A bunch of Amazon boxes turned into these little pallets.
And then you have the tote bags for 4 different colors, 4 different designs.
The only thing here is that when we purchased the bags, they all had these really ugly, shiny white cords to carry them. So we ended up buying, I think, like 6,000 feet of neon-colored paracord, and we replaced all of those. And that just makes a huge difference from our point of view.
Yeah, so very colorful, very different. All the badges, they're made of wood. They're also spray painted. They have a gold sticker with a name. So we at the beginning, the first 2 or 3 conferences, we did the typical plastic pouches, but we haven't done those in years. Everything has to be a special material. All the names are printed one by one. There's no easy way out. And again, you get those textures that you just can't get with regular printing, much less with those
or irregular materials. Yeah. And this is the first year where social media kind of exploded with the branded materials, and people started to post, and others were like, "Oh, I'm jealous. I'm not there. I should be there." A couple people even would email us, "Is like, I couldn't make it this year. Can you make me a badge, please? Can you send me one?"
So aside from it feeling good that people are enjoying what we're doing, it was actual free advertising. Free in a nice way, in the sense that we've seen people people that have left comments in those photos attend years later. So it really functions as the most dependent word of mouth, where your designer friend recommends this event and is enjoying it, and you're like, all right, next year I'll have to check it out. The second example of Mexican ingenuity and hard work is this idea of turning something relatively mundane like ice cones into something beautiful and ornate. And I'll let our friend here.
He's an artist.
Yes. And it's just like so pretty, so simple. But and there's a line of people just watching and waiting for their snow
Piruli?
cone. Yeah, that piruli. That's exactly right. I hadn't thought about that word in years. But again, it's just like you look at the materials that he's working with, even the block of ice, like that.
And the place.
How lo-fi is that? It's like getting a little bit of that pollution from the cars. That's what gives it that special taste. So stuff like that is what gets us going. So for 2016 in Nashville, one of the big things about Nashville is its history of country music. And one of the things that makes country music interesting, or what made it interesting to us, was the suits that the singers like Dolly Parton wear, which are these really ornate suits with floral arrangements and rhinestones and
a lot of nature and paisley, and oh my gosh, you can go on forever.
So there was that aspect of Nashville that we introduced into that identity. And then also because, again, being a big music town, we thought, all right, could we do the name badges out of vinyl records? So the first thing that we did was, go get a vinyl record and ask our friends at Industry Print Shop in Austin, hey, can you print on this? So, you
Given the texture, given
the material. And they were like, okay, yeah, we can print on this. Except it turned out that they needed a special link that they haven't used. The whole industry as a whole, the silk screening industry as a whole, has not used it in the past 20 years because it's so toxic. And but it's the only thing it's the only kind of ink that would adhere to the vinyl.
So all it really meant is that they had to print with proper ventilation, which again, August in Austin is not when you want to keep the print shop open to the environment.
I'm just realizing we were real pioneers in this whole virus thing, like working with the windows open, working outside, masks.
Working from home.
Yeah, all right. Anyway, so once we knew that we could print, we went out and bought around 300 vinyl
Of the
records.
cheapest, non-important records that we could find.
That's our haul. In Austin, I think it took us like 2 days to get all
Yeah.
of this. It was so easy. And the first thing we had to do is like figure out
How can we use the most material and the easiest way to then separate it into multiple pieces?
Yeah, and make the least amount of cuts possible, because cutting vinyl is extremely hard. We couldn't do it on a laser cutter, which was our initial intent, because because it releases toxic fumes
And it
as
can catch
cuts.
fire.
Yeah, which is not good. So there was that nasty ink being laid down at Industry, and then this is
So you have to score it 3 times for each of the lines that you're going to end up cutting with a very strong big blade that we ended up getting special for this.
because we're not cutting through here. It's just scoring, as Bryony said, so that then we can snap out each piece, one by one, taking out all the extra pieces, so that you're left with just this batch areas.
And every now and then one of them would break. But
And then once we have those pieces, then you have to have a hole for them to hang from somehow. And, this is the truest test of our marriage. You cannot see this off of camera, but Bryony is not even looking at me with the drill going like less than an inch from her
and this is
fingers.
actual speed, pretty much.
Like, she's just grabbing one from a pile and putting, and she's just trusting me to not
I just
drill
jam
through
it
her
into the
fingers.
corner. He drills. He lifts up, and I know I can move out.
Show them all of your fingers so that they know that they're all here. She broke another one recently, and it wasn't my fault. So it was my fault. Damn it. So this is what you end up with. Again, we have 4 different designs, so you can see the influence of those countries, of the suits and the patterns and the floral arrangements on the illustrations that we created.
The use of
Color.
colors.
And then as you get close to the product, you can really, like, if you run your finger through it, you can hear the music. No, you can just hear the texture, and then you have the silk screen on top of it. It just creates this really beautiful tactile experience.
And then, with each stage that we hire, the stage itself gets larger and larger, and it's something that we feel we need to fill a little bit and brand as well. So for this one, being in the symphony, it was extremely large. And so each of these letters is actually about 4 feet tall. And it took maybe about 4 months of navigating dinner or letter painting, because as you can see, that letter is actually over the stove. It was the only area where I could actually prop it. There it is.
You can see the pans.
And the Lego box, where I could prop it and not break my back, because it took many, many, many hours of painting. And I went pretty much old school, tracing all of this with chalk and French curves, and then using painters paint and little brushes, and just it took 2 or 3 layers of each color for each of the letters. And then that little pencil was the perfect size for those white dots that would represent the rhinestones, and that eraser was just perfect. I lost it a couple times, and I almost lost my shit.
And then just to put it in perspective, this is a king-size bed in our bedroom. That's how big the letters were and how much space they occupied in the house.
And that's how we lived for several months.
Yep. And then some of the rhinestones were paint, but others were actual. We wanted them to sort of
Flicker.
and shine like if they were rhinestones on the suit. So we tricked them out with some really nasty kind of like Christmas lights in the back, and in the back it just looked horrible. But from the front, you can see how and we had them set to a kind of like a pulsing slowly. Pace, so you could really see the different lights shimmer at different times throughout the day. It was really convincing. Third example out of 4.
And just the last thing about the letters, at this point, it becomes a thing at the end of the conference where people get to take them. We have different systems depending on if we have brand new conference or just BNConf.
Yeah, so we give them away, and not because we're grandiose people, it's just like we don't want to bring them back because it's so hard to take them there that after all the work we've gone through, the last thing that we want is to have to deal to bring them home. And we
To put them in storage.
Yeah. So some of these letters are in different houses or offices around the U.S., maybe the world. All right, so here's another example of Mexican ingenuity. How do you get loads of concrete from one floor to another without stepping on it, without, at an even pace?
Without breaking your back.
Yeah. And so this kind of stuff is just what we thrive on, things like this that are just about systems that allow very few people, it's just 3 workers laying down a shit ton of cement in a very efficient way. So speaking of cement or concrete,
Yeah, the last conference that we did in New York, we decided to go with a cliche of the concrete jungle, but obviously giving it our spin. And so it all started with having purchased this house in Bloomington, Indiana that now had space, and we had 4,000 pounds? I think 4,000 pounds of concrete delivered on a random work day that we would turn into the conference materials.
And, yes, the cliche is that New York is the concrete jungle, but what makes it the concrete jungle? It's the buildings. What makes those buildings, some of those buildings, interesting are the inscriptions on some of them that are just like sort of relatively simple type, just receded into the concrete.
Even if some of these are not actual concrete, they're limestone, they're other materials, but
You get the gist. So we started experimenting with making our own molds and starting to fill them with concrete and see, can we glue this on top of on a book?
for a program, how thin can we go? How thick do they need to be? Do they need to be reinforced with fabric, with some kind of mesh so that they don't break? What is too heavy? What is too light?
And then after a lot of trial and error, we ended up with the perfect mix, with just the right amount of molds that we could do over and over each day. Those are the ones for the cover. These are the ones for the badges.
And just to put it into perspective, this took about 2 to 3 hours a day, 6 days a week for over 6 months of creating all of these pieces, because in the end we needed about 4,000 pieces of concrete.
And these are some little cubes that we made, and you'll see finished pictures of everything.
We just, paperweights, just because, we had that option.
And then this is our workshop, just starting to get full of all the materials as we start to produce them. We started to pack them a little bit, separate them so that we can then handle them a little bit better. But you can get a sense of the scale, of the amount of concrete that we're working with. And then, once you have all that concrete, there's no magic button. There's no secret. There's no secret to how you apply them to a batch. You just have to glue one by one.
Well, the secret is you have to use linoleum glue. After testing about 18 different kinds of glue, that is what we figured was the one that actually adhered the best and was the most economic.
And one thing that's also important to note, that by now, after that 2014 conference, when we realized that doing any of this with the volunteers the day before the conference was not a good idea, now Bryony and I do everything. So we spend a lot of months before the event doing this on our own. And then this is, these are the final pieces that they're all different. The concrete has reacted to the water, to the air, to the moisture in different ways. you had different lots of little holes in different places.
Yeah, so one of the things that you have to do with concrete is shake it in order to get the bubbles out. But we chose to only partially do that so that each one would have a little bit of an imperfection and added elements that would make them all different.
And you can see how nice those bubbles are. And then those are the name badges. Again, they're a little bit different.
And the black is a foam, so there was a really nice textile contrast.
And because then it wasn't so heavy. And then these are the little cubes. Just cubes for fun. Why not? All right, the last example of Mexican ingenuity. And this is about turning, things that you don't expect to be things that you expect to be one thing, turning them into something else. So here's kind of like a cool little contraption.
It's got his oil, no, that's detergent.
Obviously, you gotta transport your beer somehow, and so again, like the idea that what you see is not always what you get with Mexican ingenuity. So, 2019, the last conference that we were able to do before the pandemic,
Our 10-year anniversary.
We decided to go big and have a party in Las Vegas. So
And really step out of our comfort zone by going to a city that offers a very different experience from what we had always done, and that we feel comfortable in.
So what is one of the coolest thing about Vegas for designers are the neon signs. So this is the flamingo, and it looks great as a static photo, but what's amazing is when you're there and all the lights are flickering on and off and on and off, and then you have a dozen other casinos down the road doing the same thing. So we're like, how can we capture that feeling in a program, in a badge, in the things
In the
that we're
website.
making? So we thought, well, how about lenticular printing? And this is the only GIF I could find of lenticular printing, so it is what it is, which is a Dancing with Jesus book. So the only way to be able to get that effect was to go to the source and take pictures of the neon signs up close. So I rented the biggest telezoom photo lens we could afford and could carry for 3 hours a night. I was able to get up close and personal with the neon signs. And this one, like unapologetically, I went as the man of the relationship, because like on the picture where I'm raising my eyebrows, that's on top of a very scary parking lot at midnight, because that's when the lights are at their best. It was really sketchy. I shouldn't even have gone up, but you don't want a nice woman just going around taking pictures in the dark around all the drunks. So I went to Vegas to take those photos. I took a lot of photos and edited those down to those that made a good pair.
That blinked on and off.
That went from on to off, or that changed from one color to another. So that when you do the lenticular, because that's how lenticular works, it takes two images and interpolates them to create that effect of on and off. And then we embedded the letters of B&Conf in there, and again, kind of like mixing and matching the different photos to create that effect of too many casinos at once. Another example. I'm going to skip this one. And then just like but again, this is how it's easy. This is the easy part, to do it digitally.
Yep.
Like,
this is for the website. This
Yeah.
is cool. We can animate it. It's no problem.
A little Photoshop, a little bit of After Effects, done. So how do you translate that into a print product?
And the lenticular printers were really excited to do something that was extremely sophisticated from their perspective, very different from everything that they had ever worked on. So they were deeply invested in this project.
Anyway, I know we're at 4 minutes to 8. We'll be done in like 5 or 6, so we're good. So what we did is that we created 12 different images, 12 different on-off combinations, and we created these die cuts of the B&Conf. You can see those. There were kissed die cuts, so that then we could take them out and not have to go through a box full of stuff.
Knowing that we were going to use basically that combination of letters for each program, but the idea was to start to mix them up.
So we had to pop all of them out, all of the different, if we go back, you can see that there's a kind of like an outer and an inner. So separating all the outer, all the outies from the innies.
These
Like
and then the counters from the O's and the
So you have the 12 different outers there, and then the 12 different inners in there. So then the process begins by, you can mix and you can pick from any of the 12 to create different combinations. And you start just laying them down there. Nothing is getting stuck yet. We're just making little lasagnas of
combinations, basically,
combinations.
so that we're making sure that we have a nice balance throughout, and we're not going to end up with, all of the one pattern at the end. We need to make sure that we use them evenly, and then we always have as quickly as possible.
So then this is still only the outer areas, and then those all get stuck, and then it's a matter of putting in different inners into the outers to complete the look, to complete all the segments for B&Conf.
Yeah, so each cover has 12 different images in total. You have to make sure that nothing is repeated. So, your eyes don't go bleary and crazy at any point.
We could have probably made our jobs a little bit easier and created a stencil, but no, then the O's are all the counters of the O's and the B's have to be individually placed instead of having a stencil and just doing it once. So the result is that you can have that many combinations down there that are very smart firstborn figured out what the math was on that, and we're like,
we're gonna trust him.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do the math. You did it. I'll trust you, and it seems feasible. And then the actual effect when you're holding the book is as you open it from left to right, the lenticular comes into play. And they're all different. They all give you that sensation of, I had one too many to drink in Vegas. And then even statically, you get that texture because you have the little bumps of the different letters coming into each other.
There's a depth to the lenticular that is unavoidable.
And then those are the badges that follow a slightly different process that we're not going to show you. But again,
that was more the idea of kind of like walking down the street. Because it being a much smaller area, we did not want to have to deal with the little counters and all of the little letters. And we really felt it would actually get lost.
Yeah, so it's just like a little inverse pyramid effect. And again, the sense that they're all different. They're unique snowflakes as our attendees, if you will.
And one of the things that we noticed is, there's a direction to the lenticular. So while the programs moved left to right, the badges moved top to bottom, because as you approach somebody and you get closer, that's where you see the movement. And so this is the stage for this one, and this has been our most ambitious stage with fake neon lights. And one of the important things is most theaters don't let you use anything that's flammable. The one time that we were allowed to use wood was very surprising. So this is all made out of acrylic. We use our laser cutter to cut the shapes out of several pieces, and we glued them together and created all of these edges, and then added the fake neon, and again used timers and had them turning on and off, both the outer and the inner for each letter, and each letter at a different speed, so that it would be a little bit like being in the street, but also not too intrusive to whoever was on stage.
And we could probably spend 30 minutes showing you videos of the process, but just to give you a sense of how these were made. So that's the acrylic.
Whenever there was curves, I cut all of these little pieces of 1/8 by 1 inch little rectangles that I would glue into a curve.
And so forth. So, in closing, so here are 3 key things, no matter where you're from, whether you're from Mexico, whether you're from the US, whether you're from Australia, wherever you are from, or Toledo, Ohio, that's great too. There are 3 key things that you can apply to your own
endeavors, whatever they may
exactly.
be.
The first one is teamwork. In our case, we do not like to collaborate with others, but we found that together
we are the perfect team for each other.
and we work very well together. We understand each other. So if you can work with 10 other people, fantastic, do that. If you can only work with one other person, then do that. Don't try to fit into a mold, because in design it's all about collaboration. Like, maybe not, doesn't have to be that way, but you do need someone or something to rely on.
I mean, that doesn't mean that we don't work with other people. If we need an illustrator, if we need a photographer, typographer, anything like that, we will do it. But the day to day, and based on what we do for the conference, I mean, we can look at each other from across the stage and be like, okay, I know exactly what's happening, and I know that I need to go introduce this speaker and leave and fix that, just by, without even saying a single word.
The other thing is resourcefulness. You have to use what you have at your disposal. Like these farmers, they don't have a fancy truck
or irrigation system.
So you just wrap them up to their motorcycle, and there you go. Bye. Let me just pause this one because it's loud. And I think the point here is that it's all about make the best use of what you have, regardless of what budget you have. What can you do to make the best possible work, to make the best use of the materials, the time, the equipment that you have. And over the years now we have a laser cutter, which we didn't have before. But then once we have that allows us to do other things that we can't yet do, and we had to figure out how to do those things.
Yeah, you have to maximize the constraints. And find ways that you're okay. I only have $1,000 for this, but how can I make it look like it's $5,000? How can I really take advantage of that constraint?
And the final one, and the most sentimental one, is to have pride. Have pride of where you came from, of your background, of the things that have happened in your life,
of the things that you make and what you do for others and what you put out into the world. Because that is what in the end will take you far. And in our case, as being from Mexico, one thing that we've realized, and I'll leave you with this GIF, is this.
Immigrants, we get the job done.
And that is our talk. So thank you, gracias for paying attention to us. And
El fin.
I'll stop sharing so that we can go back to Zoom. Hopefully you're still there. I have no idea. We've been talking to...
It's always so bizarre not knowing if there's anybody on the other side.
We're here, we promise. I think lenticular lasagna is the phrase of the night. I'm going to carry that one with me to bed. Think about it. Great job.
Yeah, that was spectacular. First and foremost, thank you both for sharing your stories with us this evening. I'm utterly amazed, obviously, knowing, or to some extent, the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes. But I could have never imagined some of the process and just the sheer amount of hours and power that it takes to pull this off. So thank you for sharing with us tonight. Thank you for Brand New Conferences, and thank you for Brand New. So with that, I do want to kind of, before segueing into the Q&A segment, I want to first announce the raffle winners for the 1-year subscription to Brand New. So we have 10 of those that were raffled off. Those were all chosen just to make sure that I highlight every point of it. Those names were pulled from the attendee list using a randomizer right before the event. That being said, I wholeheartedly apologize for any names that I may and ultimately will mispronounce. Following the conclusion of tonight's event, the winners will receive an email with directions on how to get their subscriptions set up. But without further ado, I'm just going to read off the list of the 10 recipients. If you are here, congrats. If not, we'll see you around. So the first person to win a subscription is Mindo. I'm already there. Mindaugas Pazvenskas. The second subscription goes to Brady Gibson. The third to Emily Frazier, Kenneth Jones, Y.E. Santi, Troy Hester, Suzanne Marshall, Teresa Gillette, Abigail Melnichenko, and lastly, Sarah Blies. So thank you all for attending the event, and we hope that you enjoy the subscription to Brand New. I know that's become a daily part of my routine and so many others. So from there, let's go ahead and jump into some of the Q&A. I can go ahead and kick that off. We have a question here from Rachel, and that reads, did you build the Brand New site, work with developers or other people, etc.? And was there a moment of, oh shoot, this got way bigger than we imagined?
Yep, I built it from the ground up using the first version, the first few versions were with movable type, so the content management system, and now it's on WordPress. But yeah, it's one of those things where because I don't trust other people, I just thought I'll do it myself. And
there's some pride in actually conquering the unknown.
And what's great is that with each version that I've designed and built, I've learned something new, or I challenged myself to implement something else. And I work with developers every now and then when there's something really difficult that I cannot solve, or a specific feature that's a lot of PHP, and it's just like I can't deal.
You can't deal, or you really don't have the time to devote to learning and doing all of that when there's a gazillion other things to be done as well.
Yeah, sometimes you have to do the math. Do I pay someone $500 to do it, or do I spend $5,000 of billable hours trying to learn it myself? And sometimes the answer, the right answer can be both at any given time. So it's just a matter of where you're at. In terms of the question of whether this has gotten way bigger than we imagined, yes. Every single day, I am like, oh shit, this has gotten bigger than it should be. Like, there's no reason why, hundreds of thousands of people should read my opinions, and because I'm the sole writer, and I don't say, again, nothing that I say or we say is about bragging. It's just like, that's what it is.
I mean, in its original form, I was also writing, but then we had 2 little kids, and they made it impossible for me to be as constant and as good as I needed to be. So I ended up taking a step back from that and just focusing on other stuff while Armin became the sole writer. And
the thing is that I write, like, we both wake up at 5 a.m, and I prepare the images the night before, and then from 5:30, once the coffee kicks in, to 6:30, which is when the post goes up, that's when I write these things. And like, I don't think that's how writing for that many people is supposed to happen. So it's always flabbergasting to me that it is so well enjoyed by so many people. And yeah, every day is a feeling of both joy and dread that so many people are going to read this.
Yeah, but it's a nice little fire under your ass to keep it up.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think a little fear is a good thing, at least in that instance. I think, like, piggybacking off of that, a question, I guess, that popped into my brain. I'm assuming that the scale on which you consume content, like branding content, we're all seeing stuff all the time as designers and artists, but I think that's like also the thought that you're giving it, it's just a higher volume than probably the average. Do you feel like, however many years you've been doing this and running this blog, do you feel like that has like an effect on your own work? For example, like, maybe you notice trends like happening faster because you're seeing like some things pop up as patterns over time. So like, how do you feel like it skews like your views on design?
I mean, it definitely does. And part of why it's almost a non-issue is because we don't do that much design work for clients. So there isn't a direct cause effect from seeing all that work and then applying it to client work.
But we do take a lot of that information, kind of transform it and apply it to the conference, in the fact that we can push the branding beyond the exact, the expected. Okay, So we see, this is how far branding is going at this point. This is a year where there's a lot more experimentation in this area or whatever. that means that if we're targeting that group of people with a brand, we can be over here. And that's where we really get that feedback or that exchange with all of the branding that we're constantly looking at.
Right.
Yeah, with that, I think, Armin, you alluded to just the amount of time that you spend, or I guess how early you get up to, kind of attend to the brand new content. But there was a question here that I thought, kind of sums it up as to, do you have an estimate of, how much time you spend writing new posts each week? Is it kind of like assuming a 5-day-a-week thing, the Monday through Friday posts, or do you ever kind of try and knock out some of those things maybe a few ahead of time? Or I guess it depends, but
No, it's every day. It's like bread. It's baked fresh every day, every morning. And part of the reason is why I've every now and then when we have to go to a conference, I'll try to write 2 or 3 in advance, and by the end of the day, my brain is fried. I can't deal with that many internal opinions in my own head to generate that much content. But no, it's I think on any given day, I'll spend anywhere between 3 and 4 hours between preparing the images, writing the content, doing a little bit of work in the comment section later. And yeah, so it's like a constant thing. And I get, like, as I mentioned with that I prepare the images the night before. That's really, for me, I think it's a key because I go to sleep. And it's not that I go to sleep thinking about it, but it stays there in my brain. And when I wake
It's
up,
the last thing that you see.
and like, this is not a metaphor or hyperbole, but the alarm sounds, I put my feet on the ground, and in my head I'm like, what am I writing about today? This. Okay, so by the time I wake up to the time I start writing, like, I'm already going. So a lot of that is a little bit for efficiency sake, so that I don't have to like stumble out of bed, make the coffee, and then let it kick in. So like right
Decide
away,
what you're going to write about.
yeah, so like right away, I'm ready to go. Because yeah, it's a lot of content all the time, every day.
yeah, I think my favorite part that I'll take away from that too is brand new. It's content baked fresh every morning. That seems to be a nice little
A
tagline.
lot of food talk in this.
Yeah.
Very hungry for dinner. Here's one that I think I'd like to know the answer to as well. So when you're in the first stages of a project, or maybe working on, conference materials right at the beginning, I mean, are there cues or gut feelings that kind of tell you like, yes, keep pursuing this, or like, no, we got to pivot? Like, is there any like major like setback that has been like a, fork in the road for you on those kind of projects?
I would say there's 2 things that really drive the beginning. One is if it's something that seems expected or that somebody else could do, then we toss it.
Yeah.
We have to do something else. And then, can we really replicate this 1,000 times in a timely way?
Yeah.
But really it's about, are we pushing the material far enough? Are we pushing the design far enough? Are we pushing the typography? That's really where it really stands.
And sometimes you find that out the hard way. Sometimes you're like, oh, we're going to pursue this way because it felt right. And then you've gone down that road far enough and like, oh, this is looking terrible. Like for Nashville, we wanted to do embroidery. We got the embroidery machine. We got the software. Bryony learned how to do the software. We got samples of
jeans and
leather.
fake leather.
So we have spent all this time and energy, and then we're like, this is looking terrible. So even though we thought this is the route we should pursue, it was wrong. So that it's okay to every now and then go like, okay, abort, and go a different route, because sometimes even though you have an intuition that something's going to work out, it just doesn't.
Right.
Or it doesn't the way that you expect it to. It might have been fine for other people, just not for us.
Yeah.
So with that, not to take us back too much back to, I guess, opinions or comments rather of the brand new, but there's a really great question here. And I think just from my time looking through the posts and obviously engaging with other viewers, one of the comments reads, first rule of the internet, don't read the comments. So just kind of asking, could you talk a bit about comment moderation on Brand New over the years, and maybe what the process is behind that? I don't think we have to get too specific into comments or content for that matter, but it's definitely an interesting thing that I think is outside of the typical wheelhouse of what we consider design when it comes to comment moderation.
And I think there's chapters to that. There's human evolution on how people have behaved, because we've had Brand New for 14 years, and prior to that we had Speak Up. So I'll let Armin explain, but there's definitely chapters in how we behave online.
Yeah, so here's my take on the Brand New comments. There are people who say, there's a lot of people who go, the comments on Brand New are the worst thing on the internet. They're not. There's YouTube, there's Reddit, there's all these worst places with worst comment sections. But let's assume that yes, the Brand New comments are bad, because everybody says like, oh, this is shit. Oh, I could have done it better. But when designers get together at a bar for lunch, in the water cooler, whatever, and they're discussing about whatever project was on Brand New, they're like, oh yeah, that's shit. They're not gonna spew a 500-word essay during a bar meeting, or or in the
water cooler.
So it's a reflection of how designers talk, how they interact with each other, and that's what I find fascinating. That it's honest, that it's raw. Sometimes it can get out of hand and it can get too annoying and too petty and too I don't like this, I don't like that, and that's what happens. But I think over the years, especially with the and yes, I only step in when there's personal attacks on a designer, or there's insider fighting between the people in the comments, which is like trying to get two cats apart from each other. It's really,
without being able to touch them,
right?
though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can delete them, but they come back.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is that with a new change to when we shifted to a subscription model in August, right away there was a big shift in positivity. Like the comments were, 90% positive, constructive. Very few people were saying like, oh, this is shit, I could do better. And so I think there's something about the random people that used to just come in for the one post that they cared about and be like, this is horrible. And then they would go over to YouTube and say like, oh, this is horrible. And then over to Facebook and troll someone. So I think there's something that really shifted with the subscription model, that the people that are in there are invested and they want to see the best out of each other. So, long way of saying that yes, it's complicated, but it's not as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. Sometimes, yes, it can get out of hand.
Yeah, I think just like I said, from my experience of what I see on there, it's there's also a good amount of individuals who are able to kind of reconcile at the end of it. It can start kind of harsh, like you said, like this is shit, and then the other one is like, no, this is great. But there always seems to be some sort of, back and forth that somehow works its way out. Some of those, I'm unsure how they were able to work it out in so few words. Others, it kind of just continues on. But yeah, I think the subscription-based model is definitely it's interesting to know and to see how that's kind of shifted that. I think combating trolls and people who just bounce around for the kind of reactions. But
yeah, I would agree that I haven't really seen any juicy discourse that would be noteworthy of like trolls since the subscription model's gone live. So I think that's a testament to weeding out some of the people that maybe just aren't very nice.
Just instigating.
Yes, starting fights. I have a couple questions here. So people kind of wanting to know, like, are there ever any bad reactions to poor reviews? Or, is there anything notable or memorable for you that would be like, you feel like was directly from a Brand New review, like there was a change or something? Like Gapgate is one that came up in the question. So Gap's response to, their stuff.
Their snafu.
Well, there was one that I cannot talk about that
Got it.
was a very direct thing from brand new, but there's cases now where, whenever I go to conferences, or when we do our conferences and I talk to designers, they're like, we hear from our clients tell us we don't want to end up on brand new with a bad review. So I think there's a sense that it's like Rotten Tomatoes. Like, you don't want to end up on the wrong end of the spectrum because it doesn't reflect good on everyone involved. So I think there's something, there is a consequence to getting a good or a bad review. And I'm not saying that we make or break businesses or make or break careers, but I think there is something.
There's a bit of pressure out there.
Because I think it's simply a reflection of the industry, and when your work gets on there, and if it gets universally loved or universally hated, there's a truth to it, whether you want to accept it or not. So, when things go bad, they can go bad. And we've had cease and desist, we've had angry designers, we've had angry clients. But for the most part, it's just, at the end of the day, it is also just an opinion. So, it can't be that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, there's just that conversation is going to happen regardless of whether or not it lives on a site or if it happens in person, but those opinions still live out there. So I think, it is important to note that. No, I think that's great. There's a few questions here that just kind of talk about client work. And I think it's pretty interesting to kind of phrase it as this, taking on limited client work now or previously. Is there something that, really makes those projects stand out where you're like, okay, this is something that we want to take on, or how do those processes come about?
That is something that has evolved over time. When we were first starting out, it was more of a, okay, who's going to pay the bill and what do I need to do? You had a few things that you were not that interested in, or you got a bad vibe out of the first client meeting and you're like, hey, maybe this is not going to work out. But at this point, it really comes down to there's just two of us. So we don't have that much time to devote to client work because we do enjoy our own projects so much and we know how much time they require. So usually we'll have one, maybe two slightly overlapping client projects going on, and they have to be interesting. Lately, we've been doing some more like cultural sector, nonprofit work that has been very rewarding in Bloomington, in our small town. So there's a local impact where we're making a difference for somebody, for a group of theater enthusiasts or something like that, the cultural district. Whereas it's not so much at this point about making sure that it pays the bills kind of thing. And we don't have the bandwidth to spend a lot of time with meetings and going back and forth with a client. So larger clients are out of the equation just by default.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we found recently when we moved to Bloomington, doing those local projects really transformed the relationship with the work. Whereas like when you do work for someone that's, even in a neighboring state, but on the other side of the country, other side of the world, there's a lack of connection that
we hadn't realized was missing.
And so now, whenever we've had a couple of inquiries about doing work for someone that's not here, and you're like, it just doesn't seem. And we're able to take on that position because we have these other revenue streams. If graphic design was our only way of earning money, it would be a whole other story. But yeah, I think there's something that's been really interesting and very rewarding about working locally.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for keeping it close to home. I don't know. That resonates really well with like a Midwest mentality. Not that you guys are going to stay here forever, but definitely.
No, but we'll always find another home and another local community, and you make it work.
There are a couple. I do want to wrap stuff up pretty shortly. I don't want to keep everybody super late. but I just want to note that there are definitely a bunch of like thank yous to you guys coming in for, you know, being a part of their people's daily routines. A lot of thank yous about the conferences. I think New York, the Concrete Jungle one was named, and then the Chicago one as well. So a lot of kudos for those. So very excited for those to someday come back to be in person again and touch things and see people.
Yes, please. We enjoy them too much not to
I
have
know.
them come back.
Yeah, I was even thinking like when you know how when you go into a conference you try to sit apart from the other person just to leave one seat before. Like I just want to touch someone. I just want my knee to touch someone else's knee.
What?
And
Share
be
our
uncomfortable. Yeah, just like let's just be all together crammed into a room. Like I can't wait for that feeling again.
We'll be crossing our fingers tonight for someday soon getting that back. All right. Well, this was wonderful. Thank you for being here. Thank you for chatting. Thank you for answering some questions. It was great having you guys. And if you're ever in the area post-pandemic, stop by and we'll show you the scene and vice versa. So, all right.
Thank you for hosting us.
Of course. All right. We'll see you guys later. Good night, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks for
thank you.
coming.
Good night.